Hey there, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. Thursday, November the 9th, 9:15 a.m. Central, thereabouts. I am Rob Howe, joined by Scott Docterman from The Athletic. We got a lot to talk about today. Hopefully, we can get through all this stuff. I actually had to write things down and prepare for this podcast, which is out of my comfort zone. I usually fly by the seat of my pants, but had to organize some things this morning. Scott, I was looking through, and we'll get to a little bit to signing day yesterday, but I went through the women's release that was sent to us and saw AJ Guyton's daughter with Iowa. So that was my "oh crap, you're old" moment of yesterday. AJ Guyton's daughter, who I covered when he was at Indiana, is now going to play for the Hawkeyes starting next year.
It's an amazing class, but yes, every year I think we start to feel that those old bones, and this is certainly another one. When you start to see players that you covered when you weren't necessarily like young, when you're
Exactly.
you're like a real journalist type of thing, not when, hey, I'm right out of school and I'm at the college newspaper. And when you see this is one that really sticks out to me, but overall, I mean, when you've got four top 100 pick or prospects, I think that's damn impressive, especially for what she's been able to do.
We don't have to go far into the weeds here because I think we'll talk about it more during the season, but it would be hard for me to think about, and I know you've written about this, just the far-reaching impact Caitlin Clark has had on this program. Because, Ava Hayden, I did a podcast with her a while back. She's the center from Oregon who's in this class as well. Really, really good player. I encourage people to check her video out. She's going to be the next one in the line of big stars, literally and figuratively, at Iowa. But she was talking about the impact of Caitlin and getting a chance to meet her when she came out to visit and those things. And if you're like a high school kid and you come to visit Iowa and you get to meet Caitlin Clark, that's got to be so impactful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you're looking at when they were in Seattle and they met Sue Bird and you saw their faces, like, wow, she came to their practice, and that's just a really an amazing thing. So I think in some ways what you do is you start to look at this and you're like, Caitlin has such a far-reaching impact on the sport, on women's sports as a whole, but also, yes, the University of Iowa. When you could see somebody like that who's on all these major, really, every network. I mean, they're barely going to play on something that you don't have to pay for. I mean, Peacock notwithstanding. So I think, seeing an Aaliyah Guyton and Ava Hayden, I mean, they're players that they could go anywhere. And they picked Iowa because of Caitlin Clark, and coming here, she's like Michael Jordan, of college sports for women's basketball. And I think you get athletes a little starstruck when they see that.
Yeah, we'll get into a little bit later on. The women play tonight, huge game, Virginia Tech, kind of in a setup feature game that will be nationally televised. Interested to see what the ratings will be for that down the road a little bit. But I think we have to start, Scott, with the news from last night, and you were all over this. Not good news for Iowa on any front, really. Noah Shannon certainly the headliner of this news. Iowa's sixth-year senior defensive tackle will not be able to play this year after getting his hopes up a few weeks ago. Actually, it's been a while now, even longer than that. A few weeks ago, we were supposed to find out and didn't. But the NCAA has now made it official that if you bet on a sport at your school, it is a 1-year suspension, which Noah Shannon falls into that category, as do Iowa wrestlers and our friend Chad Leistico, who you can hear with Scott in a
Yeah.
couple hours on their podcast. He would give you all the Hawk talk you need here on Thursday mornings. He confirmed with Terry Brands, Iowa assistant wrestling coach, that, and you may have had this too, Scott. I just saw this on social media. Abe Assad, Nelson Brands, Tony Cassiope, Kobe Seabrecht also join Noah Shannon in missing their seasons. I looked back, Oklahoma State, Scott, was the last duel last season. Those four guys I just mentioned were in Iowa's starting lineup, along with Spencer Lee, Max Murin, and Jacob Warner, who are all gone now. So that's 7 of your starting lineup in the last duel you had for Iowa wrestling that will not be there this year.
Yeah, it's it's a conclusion that I'm glad at least it's over, but it's one that really, I have a lot of different thoughts about this, and let's start with the negative side because let's bash the NCAA for some of this, and that is a month ago when we found out that they were going to probably there were recommendations to change the guidelines to allow, unless you were betting on your own team, that you would only receive education, and then to allow those athletes to return to practice. A month later, that's nothing but a tease. That really, to me, is the biggest problem here with what was finally adjudicated, and that was that you toyed with somebody's emotions, that you made it look like they were that they were going to play again, in football, or they were going to be eligible in the winter sports. And instead, you took it all away a month later. And, they were supposed to, the meeting was supposed to take place. I think it was October 26th, I believe, somewhere around there. And then now here we are, or, 25th, one of the two. And then here we are. And it's just like, I can't, for Noah Shannon, for Deshaun Hanika too, for Iowa State, and plus the wrestlers at Iowa, but specifically the football players, 3/4 of the way through the season, they were allowed about a month ago to start returning to practice. And now, no, you're not going to play. You lose a year of eligibility for Hanika, and for some of the wrestlers, they can return. But for, Shannon, it's over. And I think that's really grossly unfair based on what transpired a month ago.
Yeah, I know you have excellent connections at The Athletic, people that do great work and have really good sources on this. So I don't know what transpired in the last month, 2 weeks. But it almost feels like, Scott, that they're making an example of these kids, because they could have easily just said, listen, we're going to let these guys compete this year, and then we're going to work towards legislation, rules, guidelines to put into place next school year. Yeah. Because you've been screwing around with this since the spring when we first heard about this. And, you let the spring athletes hang out to dry. Then this went through all summer, and you've put, these student athletes in limbo for months. You're playing with their lives. They're also student athletes. They got to go to school and study. I know Noah Shannon's a 6-year guy. I don't know what he's studying at this point, but hopefully he's gaining some knowledge out of whatever it is. But it just feels like this organization, which we've talked about ad nauseum on this podcast, is always reactionary instead of proactive, is doing it again here and costing student athletes again. I looked this up, Scott. I actually, like I said, I did preparation for this podcast. I hope everybody is happy with that. Now I need to find what I pulled up about some gambling numbers. It was in the billions, put it that way, for 2022. Well in the billions, sports gambling handles in this country. So I found it. Legal sports, this is from Front Office Sports. Legal sports books handled $93.2 billion in bets last year, another record, and a 61.1 increase over 2021 handle. Look at all the NCAA institutions, and the NCAA works for these institutions. Look at how much money they're making out of this, and they're going to punish these kids for wagering on a team at their and we know what this is, women's basketball. I mean, it doesn't feel, Scott, like the punishment fits the crime here. And if you feel like, hey, we got to put our foot down, and we've talked about the pitfalls of allowing student athletes to bet on sports, other sports at their school, inside information, all of that stuff. But this just feels like overreaching punishment here. And if you want, like I said, if next year, if you want to put into place next year, okay, everybody knows the rules now. If you bet on anybody, any team at your school, it's a 1-year suspension. And I'm not saying that these guys didn't know that there was a chance that they would get in trouble. They do absorb some of the responsibility in this. We all knew that this was not kosher, and they did it anyway.
Yeah, that's the problem, that they knew it was a problem. They bet, and then they got caught because, well, we'll find out a little bit more of the ramifications as we go, probably once football season ends. But it seems very overzealous by law enforcement to start targeting 2 campuses, not 3 or 4 in the state, and have it only be a state agency in Iowa to really do this. I think that really, you start with that, and it's really
seems like the governor supported it too.
Yeah,
her comments.
Yeah, well, she's backing up law enforcement, but let's see what the tune is when everything comes out. But anyway, I think overall, I'm not opposed to a 1-year ban for somebody betting on their own school. I think in the very beginning, especially when we were starting to learn details of that, we talked ad nauseum about those types of situations because they do constitute somewhat of a conflict of interest and somewhat of an issue, I would say. But by and large, even when you start to compare like Deshaun Haneke with Noah Shannon's was very innocent by standards. I mean, Haneke had allegedly bet 70 times on the Cyclones, and he was charged, and then the charges were dropped because Story County prosecutors didn't file those charges 45 days from his waiver of his preliminary hearing, whereas Noah Shannon was never charged. This seems to be the only event. I mean, so it's kind of like what Beth Getz said in the very beginning when the NCAA started this up, which was this was overly harsh. What transpired to some extent over the last month was once the recommendations got out, then some of the officials on that committee had heard from people who thought, ooh, that is pretty light when you start to talk about people betting on their own school, that they're only going to get education for that because of all the issues that we've talked about. And so that's why they decided to wait 2 weeks and postpone it. And again, the clock was ticking for Noah Shannon at that point. And it's like, well, there goes the Minnesota game. Maybe you'll get a chance to play against Rutgers. And then to have this happen and then lose a year of eligibility along with it, for him, you're done. You didn't have any wax back. So that's really the unfortunate part of it. And I think we can agree that knowing Noah over these years, it just feels wrong. It feels wrong for him personally. The others I can't speak for. I don't know the wrestlers as well. Again, some of the things with Deshaun Haneke, it's not, I wouldn't feel as strongly to say anything, but with Noah Shannon in particular, it's just, and he was made an example of in Iowa, and Iowa State's athletes were made an example of. And this is really the unfortunate part of this whole situation.
And trying to find what's fair. Like you said, if Haneke bet 70 times compared to Noah Shannon's once or twice, do they deserve the same punishment? You would think common sense would tell you no. But then if the guideline is you bet on you bet it all on one of the teams on your campus, boom, that's 1 year, no matter if it's a 1 or 70. So I get that too. The biggest problem, and I think you would agree with this, Scott, I think this is what's made Kirk Ferentz so angry and Terry Brand so, and obviously Terry has a direct connection to this, but is the toying with the emotions. It's the lack of I guess just like it going, just building from the spring and just leaving guys hang out to dry, not knowing what their futures is, leaving them in limbo, and then coming back a month ago and giving him hope and letting him practice. And he's working his ass off to get back so he can play in the game. And then you pull the rug out from under him again a month later. That's just, I think, doing that as an NCAA, at the bureaucracy of overlooking and trying to look out for student athletes, this is the complete opposite of that.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And that is that had they been punished, they were punished at the beginning of the year. His appeal was denied. He was looking at it in a certain way. Noah Shannon's case, and then the wrestlers too, because they have a full season ahead of them, but specifically because the football season's going on, and then all of a sudden, okay, we're revisiting this and it looks like we're going to pass this. And yes, by the way, I was asking, and Iowa State too, asked for clarity about this. Yes, they can return to practice while this is being decided. And then, well, we're going to postpone it. And then 2 weeks later, well, we're going to, no, that's not going to be the case. The toying of emotions is just uncalled for here. Whether, to go all the way back to when they announced that they were going to revisit these guidelines, had they not brought up any of the possible outcomes, then there's no real harm done. That they're just going to revisit this and then they're going to try to streamline it and maybe, but now at this stage, to take away that hope, that's really demeaning by that organization. And I think they owe them an apology for this. I don't think this is a fair outcome based on, again, what they said in early October versus to how they their final final analysis here in early November.
Yeah, just giving them hope and then pulling it away was really unfortunate and probably the worst part of this whole process, I thought. And as I think I mentioned this on the podcast, after I saw Noah downtown walking his dog, and it was about a month ago. It was right after he heard that he could get back to practice. And he had told me then that he was feeling good, that he was going to be back like in a week. And he was so happy and so upbeat about it. To think about what his feelings and emotions were yesterday, it kind of breaks my heart a little bit, because Scott and I have been fortunate enough to get to know Noah. I covered him in recruiting too. I've known Noah for almost a decade now. And it sucks. It really sucks. And the one thing that's good, Scott, is I don't worry about Noah in life. He's going to be a success no matter what he does, because he approaches life the right way. He has the right priorities. He's just a good kid, which makes this even harder to take.
Yeah, it does. And I guess if there's anything that's positive for him out of this, and it's not this, obviously, I'm just gonna try to sprinkle some sugar on some shit. But it's that, he was able to come to Iowa and have his surgeries on his labrum, I believe it was, in the spring, rehab it, get cleared for, be healthy, then do some practicing in the fall, showed his commitment to the team by remaining with the team, because frankly, I kind of wondered in early September, when this all came down, that if you're him, do you just walk away? You just say, all right, fine, I'm going to drop out of school. I'm going to go work out on my own. No, he stayed with it. He stayed with the team. He wanted to be part of the team, and he helped all of his, players and his teammates and younger teammates, and then worked himself back in. And it's really unfortunate because he's such a good young man. And now if he can, put himself in a position of maybe he can become a free agent in the NFL. I don't really see him being drafted, especially after this situation, but get with a team, potentially compete and land with an NFL club. That's certainly possible. But if not, or if it's very short-lived, he has proven a lot. He has proven his commitment, and everybody knows the mettle of his character. So I think he's going to be just fine in life. It's just really a rotten situation that he was dealt, and it's not, it's completely different, but it's not that different, being kind of collateral damage to the NCAA machine as Drew Ott, that, he played just a little bit too much, and nope, we're not going to, let him come back. And ultimately it cost him. He legitimately was an NFL guy. No question in my mind. Yep. He would have been third round or better, but he needed to get healthy in order to play. And then I think that's really where we are right now with this. And, the NCAA needs to look at itself a little bit more. And it's not just a monolithic empire, with all these people in offices in Indianapolis, because this is constituted by commissioners and schools and reps, and they're looking at it and they're identifying things. So, but it's a bureaucracy with a bureaucracy, and it's really, and when you see the small people get ran over like a Zamboni, that's when it really comes to life, that they need to be a little bit better than what they are.
Iowa coaching staff has tremendous NFL connections. I would be really surprised if Noah Shannon doesn't at least get a camp tryout.
Yeah,
he's gonna get a look, and then it's up to him. And hopefully, this, being out of action for this long doesn't hurt him, and he's not too rusty when it is time for him to get in there and work out, and try to make a team. We've seen plenty of Iowa guys travel that path and have success. So we wish him the best. I guess, we've talked about the personal side of this, Scott. From a football standpoint, he certainly would have been a great addition to this defense. That said, this defense is still damn good without him. And, put it this way, it'd be worse if he was the star wide receiver.
Yes.
Yes. I mean? So that said, we're going to use this to segue into a quick look back at Northwestern, and then some thoughts on Rutgers as well. We'll just kind of stay on the football train here, and then we'll get into some basketball, some other things in a bit. One thing that I wanted to start with before we dug in, Scott, and because I know people have asked me about this, I'm sure I've asked you, it's out there. The Caleb Johnson situation, you and I were both very high on him coming into the season. I thought he may have been my breakout player.
Yeah, I was.
So, I mean, I did not see this coming, and I'm not going to take anything away from Jazion Patterson or Le'Shawn Williams, because I think they're playing really well, and I think Iowa, we talk about how bad this offense is, they're good at running back. They've got a good stable of running backs. They really do. I had heard that it was an illness with Caleb, that he wasn't feeling well last week, that he had a bit of a bug that may have cost him some practice time. The coaches don't like when you miss practice. It just seems like one of those kind of weird situations that we've seen before with coaches and players here, that it's hard to connect all the dots, but we've seen it before, so we know. I mean, look at somebody like Caleb Brown, who got himself in the doghouse a little bit earlier this season, made the big play against Northwestern, right? Made the big catch. So I would caution people to overreact to this, but I would say it is something. It's not nothing.
Yeah. Agreed. And I guess, there's part of me also that looks and says, LaShawn Williams is playing really well.
Yes.
And I don't know that I'd want to take him off the field. I mean, you see the way he attacks defenders and attacks the hole and everything. He hits it really, really hard. And Patterson has a different gear. He's not as physical, but he's not weak by any stretch. But he's quicker and he's more elusive, So
it's funny if you stood those two guys up next to each other without pads, and you say, okay, who's the power back?
Yeah,
who's
right.
Who's the guy who runs people over?
Yeah,
Caleb Johnson looks like Adonis.
Oh, I know. He's just got a massive build and a frame and everything. And I guess I wonder, LaShawn Williams, what has he done to be taken off the field? Yeah. He's been the healthy one all year.
Yeah.
And then when you need the change of pace, Patterson provides it, a little bit quicker. He gets to the hole a little bit faster and can scoot around the edge. So that kind of puts Caleb Johnson as, well, where do you fit in? Now, I think I do believe that he's got more upside than the other two, but he also is a long strider in this, and when you have a team that has no passing game, you kind of you don't really need a long strider at running back. You need just an incredibly, like LaShawn Williams hits the hole hard and 6 yards. Great.
I think you could say the same thing about Jazz.
Yeah, and he does too.
He hits it hard, and that's the one knock on Caleb is does he run hard enough all the time? Does he does he maximize his natural gifts?
Exactly. And even when you see the younger ones that played earlier this year when there were injuries, they did a nice job of that too. It doesn't take a rocket scientist or a Nostradamus to go, somebody's probably going to leave this. Who's it going to be? And I guess we'll find out the rest of the way because we know at this position injuries happen. But don't be surprised if somebody leaves. And in today's world, and I would caution people from getting too upset, unless it's 2 out of 3, then I would get upset. But if one of them leaves, move on. It's part of it. It's just the way it works. And now, if all 3 leave, then start freaking out. But
yeah, no doubt. And it would be one thing if like Scott said, if the other 2 backs weren't performing, but they are.
Yeah.
If you look at this offense right now, those are probably your best options right now. Are those 2 guys, and probably Addison the Stringer, who's really developing nicely at tight end. But going back to that game, Scott, at Northwestern, I didn't have a chance to ask you. I asked Chad and Tom Kakert about this on Tuesday, but people don't understand, or people are not that they don't understand. They don't see us on Tuesdays when we're just like chickens with our heads cut off, trying to get to as many interviews as we can with our little bit of access that we get to the players. But I didn't get to ask Scott on Tuesday, long story short, as a Cubs fan, what it was like covering a game in Wrigley. Chad and Tom were gushing over the experience. Was it like that for you?
Yeah, absolutely. It was fantastic. I covered one there in 2012 when Iowa played at Soldier, and Fran McCaffrey threw out the first pitch. And it was kind of funny at the time. I was standing kind of behind home plate and off to the side, and it kind of was coming for me. And luckily the catcher caught it, and he just kind of said, "I was aiming for you." And he was joking at the time, probably not now, but anyway, so I'd only been there once in that capacity, several times, of course, as a fan. And I loved everything about it. I thought it was just great. Loved the layout of it. I loved, just being able to see the bleachers and see the field. I'm a Bears fan too, and I kind of have some Bears history, and they played at Wrigley until 1971. And so the stat I wanted to throw out there in the worst way was there had been no punt returns there since Gale Sayers' 6th touchdown in 1965. And I was waiting for Cooper DeJean to explode, and he just about did there on one of them. But and Kirk poo-pooed the whole thing afterwards. And I'm like, come on. I mean, Wrigleyville was black and gold. There were very little Northwestern fans comparatively for it being a Northwestern home fan game. I mean, they were getting booed, when they took the field, and it was such a cool event. It was like a bowl game, but it was like different because it mattered more, and the fans were just more into it because Chicago is kind of it's Big Ten country. It's certainly kind of an outpost for Iowa. I thought if you could play there every other year, do it. And of course, Kirk's complaining. Both teams need to co-sign on this stuff, and you're like, "Oh, stop it!" I mean, this is the other team's home game. They can play wherever they want, and they're going to have to play at different places here once the field starts getting torn down. I don't know if it'll be Wrigley or Soldier or Guaranteed Rate Stadium or some high school out in Evanston. I don't know, but
they could probably do that for some of their games.
Yeah, right. What might be kind of cool for them is if they get like a late game against Wisconsin to go play in Miller Park.
Yeah.
Something like that. But but anyway, I thought it was I love the experience. I think most fans did. They seem to be over the moon. I met up with like 3 high school buddies. One lives in Chicago, and he texted me before. He's like, "Hey, can we say hi?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty limited, but sure." And then all of a sudden, there was another friend of mine who I hadn't seen in 25 plus years who lives in New York, and another one who lives in Pittsburgh, and they showed up, and then there were stories all over the place like that. So I thought it was great.
Yeah, very cool. And not something you like to see like regularly, but once in a while, I think it's kind of nice to change it up a little bit and give the fans something that they can really embrace, because they usually take over Ryan Field, but it's not the same. It's not the same as what happened the other day when you have Wrigleyville and people being able to kind of, interact on the streets and all that other stuff. From a game perspective, Scott, it was kind of, I don't say the opposite of Minnesota, but the games were similar. And this is the formula, right, that we've talked about now for pretty much most of the season. It's coming down to the fourth quarter. It's a defensive battle. Who makes the plays at the end of the game? Iowa made 2 huge plays. Ontario Thompson with a second blocked punt. And the key there was Iowa being able to score a touchdown. It's only a 25-yard drive, but if you've seen this offense, that's like going 100 miles.
Yeah, exactly.
In snowshoes.
Both ways.
It's uphill both ways. But that was it. And then put in the position like they were at the end of the Minnesota game, punt returns aside, when they had a chance to make a play, they come out right away. Hill hits Nico Ragaini with an 8-yard completion on first down, which was like, holy crap, they got 8 yards on first down. And then he hits, then a running play that doesn't work naturally. Yeah. And then the long pass to Caleb Brown, then 3 running plays that go for 3 yards total. Yeah. And then the field goal. That's Iowa football in 2023, Scott. What we saw Saturday. That is the path to, that's the blueprint to victory for Iowa football.
Yeah. And what's a shame, Rob, is I never felt like they were out of control of the game until they gave up that touchdown. I thought that they were the better team. Defensively, they clearly were the better team. Offensively, they moved the ball some. They made some mistakes, and there were some really – there was a combination of some bad execution with not real good play calling. I think on the interception in the end zone early in the game, that was just you shake your head at, because they had 3 tight ends on the field. They make Nico Ragaini run all the way across the formation in motion, then cut up and then run, 25 yards or whatever it is towards the goal line. And he's not your best fade ball thrower, receiver. He's shorter and if you're going to do that, you're going to want Vines or you're going to want Seth Anderson or something like that. But still, when you make a receiver run, basically sprint 35 yards across the field, probably maybe 40, and then cut up another 20. I mean, and then you're going against a defensive back who's not running that same type of play. And then the ball is thrown is kind of 50-50-ish, but actually more inside where it shouldn't have been thrown. And you're asking a lot out of your players, man, in the wrong spot. So I thought that was you'd probably get a field goal out of that. You had Drew Stevens miss a field goal, but that was still a pretty good attempt, I suppose. Hits the goalpost. Those are kind of plays you just go. Ugh. Although, 3 years ago, Caleb Shudak hit the goalpost and they lost 21-20. That one leaves a bigger mark, but overall, yeah, I mean, they finally got a scoring drive, and then the last one, big pass, and I know everybody kind of wanted to jump on the Caleb Brown finally did it, it's bandwagon, but I was probably more on the wow. Deacon Hill finally completed a good pass.
That was
bandwagon
throw, man. That was like, okay, now I understand what he might look like in practice sometimes.
Yeah, because he's got a gun.
Yep.
And
it's just the accuracy.
Yeah. It's
and decision making.
And decision making and not locking in on receivers and probably I would say a release that's not quite Dan Marino-esque or Joe Namath-esque, but just a lot of different things that are going on. And it just seems to not identify receivers very quickly in the pocket. There's so many different things, and it's almost like picking on them. When you start to go down this path, in some ways, and I'll bring this up, we haven't done this for a few years, or a year, but it's almost like with Licklider. It's like, where do you guys start in breaking down this team? There's just so many different problem areas. Yeah. And it's kind of that way with the passing game right now. And it's not going to get better, but you just kind of got to deal with it and move on.
Yeah. And to that end, I know people are still wanting a quarterback change. It's certainly not going to happen while they're winning games. That just, he's not going to mess with that. He's been stubborn. I mean, stubborn's maybe not the right word. Set in his ways more, which is kind of stubborn with the quarterback position for 25 years. I mean, we can go back through it. We won't, but we could. But I know you guys reported that Marco Linnaeus is working with the second team before that game at Northwestern. Talk to me a little bit about that, what you think is going on here. Seems like Joey Labus come December 4th, maybe in the portal. And I'm not saying I know that, guys, but it just seems like he's not part of the plan.
Yeah, you read the tea leaves, and why would you stay? I mean, why wouldn't you hit the portal at this point? And yeah, I mean, we saw Marco. He was working out with the second team. Sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't. Like in pregame, Deontay Craig hasn't taken those snaps in pregame for a little while, a couple of games, and I was like, well, is he hurt? Or no, he's out there starting, he's playing, just whatever. But this is a little more calculated, and it tells me that if there's going to be a change, or if Deacon gets hurt, then Marco's your number 2. And all along, with the way Deacon has performed, if they felt like they could rely on Joey Labus, they would have already made that switch. There's just no way you stick with him if you feel like that option's just not there, that you just don't feel like he gives you anything. Because, frankly, it's a really tough situation. So it makes sense, have Marco out there and get him accustomed to it, because you don't know when, he might get an owie on his hand and he needs to come out of a game, and who's going to go in and what can they do. And if Marco's your guy for the future, I mean, hey, they offered him and got his, commitment way in advance, 2 years or so in advance. Then you're going to want to make sure that, you want to see what he has, because next year somebody's going to have to be number 2. I don't think it's going to be Joey Labus.
It'll probably be Deacon, won't it?
Yeah,
if Cade comes back.
Yeah, but what if Marco is your number 2?
Yeah, that could be. He could pass Deacon, I guess. That's certainly with I caution other people for this all the time, and I should have done it myself. Guys get better in college. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
The improvement happens, and it's not linear either. It happens at different rates. But I also think this helps Scott in that the turnstile that we see with the transfer portal at quarterback. You're telling Marco right now, listen, we really like what we've seen from you since you've got on campus. We're building you up. We got you right there behind Deacon. Cade comes back next year. you make progress, we'll kind of see what happens. And it keeps him engaged and keeps him from thinking about, hey, is the grass greener somewhere else?
No kidding. Yeah. I mean, because you look at what's going to happen December 4th, whether they play in the Big Ten championship or not. If Joey goes in the portal, they got a bowl to play. And it's going to be at that point, Deacon Hill and Marco and Tommy Paholski Jr. Is your three quarterbacks, and you've got to make sure that you've got your guy ready to go. And again, I look back to the first performance or two that Deacon Hill had. If they had any faith at all in Joey Labus, he would have been in there. You just can't. But they're dealing with it. This is the path that they've chosen, and right or wrong. And I think when you look at with Marco, you do want to see more because he was more the scout team guy, especially early in the year. Now you want to see him what he can do with Iowa's offense, and look at this from the big picture. In his case, the guy who recruited him is already gone, Ken O'Keefe. The guy who really picked him will be gone after this year, and Brian Ferentz. So you've got to get him engaged, or otherwise he might start looking around whether he's good enough or not.
Yeah, no doubt. And like you said, I think logistically it makes sense too, because we got an email. Drew Stevens named Lou Groza Award semifinalist. There you go.
Yep.
Breaking news. That happened before we stopped recording, so that's always good.
Yeah.
And I lost my train of thought. So let's go with that in mind. Let's go and take a commercial break here and come back and we'll look at the Rutgers game. Support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. Thank you to Systems Unlimited for the great work in the community for over half of a century and their support of this podcast. We appreciate it a great deal. We're going to hear from a few more sponsors, and Scott and I will be back on the other side, and we'll dive into Rutgers a little bit and talk some men's and women's hoops. We're back on the Hotspot podcast. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you guys for hanging in there during the break. Scott, you and I took a trip up to Cedar Rapids not long ago to watch a young man pledge his allegiance to the Iowa Hawkeyes. Yesterday, he reversed course. Nick Brooks, big-time prospect, the number one prospect in the state for the class of 2025, Cedar Rapids Kennedy offensive lineman. A host of offers from schools from around the country, has reopened his recruitment, Scott. When we left that press conference, we talked about the possibility of this happening. I'm just surprised it happened so quickly.
Yes, me too. It's almost to me like why did he go through that? And I feel like, and I hope you do too, that man, we blew a Friday afternoon going all the way up there. Fridays are precious during football season. I mean, you got to work Friday nights, but it's like, we got a lot to do, and for the charade of let's have a big thing in the cafeteria and your parents are there. You've got, I don't know, a couple hundred people there watching you pull out an Iowa hat, commit, blah, 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 blah. And then, less than 2 months later I'm opening up my commitment. I'm went to Texas Tech and probably now figures to enjoy a lot of the recruiting trips and wine and dine and all that stuff. But, I don't blame him. I don't blame any recruit. Make sure you got the right fit and everything like that. And maybe he was a little, once he started to feel the love from everybody else, he decided, I want to start looking around. And then, very well could have been Iowa. I have to check, but saying, well, decommit now go do your thing and then we'll just talk or something like that. But I didn't like the vibe of this. I think this is really unfortunate, because why commit in the first place if you're just going to do this 55, 58 days later? It doesn't look good. Let's put it that way. And I'm sure Brian White is not happy about this, at Cedar Rapids Kennedy, because they have a real strong connection with Iowa. Of course, his son plays there, but to talk to media about him and what he's going to do at Iowa, and to go through all this and then back out, it's not, if he picks Iowa again, he's not going to get this kind of fanfare. There's no way.
Yeah, it's so hard. I think it was his 17th birthday, right? The day that he committed when we were there.
Yeah.
Young kid. It hasn't been long since you've had teenagers. I have teenagers. If you have or had teenagers, you kind of understand the brain waves and what's going on, and unpredictability. But for Nick, he was going to commit, Scott, back in the spring to Iowa, and then he backed off that, and then did it on his birthday, and now is backed off again. But it's just a different landscape now. You've got, obviously, he announced the Colorado offer shortly after decommitting from Iowa. Deion has made it known that they need to improve their offensive line. They've got a shit ton of money in NIL. These are all things that are different parts of the equation now, too, Scott. Because I'm not going to say Nick Brooks, but just say a kid like that commits to you, and you have a view of him, how interested you are, how big of a part of your program you think he can be, what you think his ceiling can be. Then you have to determine how much do we invest in this from NIL. When a kid is this highly regarded and has this many options, that's a different thing for Iowa now. They've got to figure out what they go for, and because you don't have unlimited funds like Michigan and Ohio State.
No, they've done well in football, not as much in basketball, but they've done well in football. For financially, they're going to have to continue to do well, because you got the portal coming up, and then you also have your rookie class. I'm going to use NFL terms. Free agency and rookie class is pretty much what these are anymore. And for somebody like that, he's got a lot going on. I don't blame him for, as you said, 17-year-olds. It's like you've got to have that mentality of either just focusing on what's going on, the task at hand, or living it up a little bit. And in his case, now all these schools are coming out and Deion. That sounds like fun, going out and talking to Deion Sanders and getting wowed a little bit there. Looked like he had fun at Texas Tech, and I'm sure he'll go to a lot of other places too. And ultimately, and it's just weird, because he moved to Georgia and then came back. He's like, what, Brandon Jacobs was kind of like I don't know, like head of a, surrogate father almost for him down there, but got homesick, came back to Iowa, then decided he wanted to play at Iowa. Now he wants to go all these other places. Yes, kids' brains go all over the place, but I don't know. If you're Iowa, you've got to stay with it, though. You can't just let it go and say, well, we'll just move on. You don't, had the issue with Caden Proctor, and this kid's actually, 70 miles closer. So, and from a feeders program. So you've got to be really careful here.
Yeah. And ultimately, if you're Iowa, you want him to make the best decision too. You don't want to have a kid that's looking, around when he gets to Iowa. It's good. If this is the way he was feeling, let him back off, let him go through, let him visit, go around the country, compare everything to Iowa. If Iowa's still the place for him, good. If it's not, it wasn't meant to be. Scott, I was working on my advance this morning about the Rutgers game, and we were talking about the blueprint and the setup and the approach for Iowa. This last 3-game stretch, and for those that maybe have been living under a rock, if Iowa wins out, it wins the West. has a 1-game lead in the division right now. But the rest of the season sets up nicely for Iowa. Rutgers averaging 26.2 points per game, ranks 72nd nationally in scoring. That's the highest ranked team offensively that Iowa has on its schedule still. Illinois and Nebraska, they are at 107 and 115 respectively. And if you were thinking about Iowa, it's 119. So I expect low scoring games, Scott, and so do the line makers. Last night, 28.5 point total in this game.
Yeah. It's unreal. It keeps getting lower. Every week is like a new record, and this one is a new record. I mean, the Minnesota one kind of bounced up, Northwestern bounced up a little bit. But, yeah, here we are. I mean, part of it is you look at the passing offenses here and the completion percentages. These are, 2 out of the 3 in the country that are below 50% completion percentage.
Yeah.
Iowa's by far the worst, but Rutgers is – when you're going against Iowa's secondary, is that the kind of passing offense?
I think they're considering playing with leather helmets on Saturday.
That wouldn't be so bad either. You'd probably get less concussions because people wouldn't leave with their helmets. But, Rutgers is going to throw only when necessary, but they have a running quarterback. Iowa is going to throw when necessary, and they don't have a running quarterback. And that's something that we've all been like, because if you can't throw the ball accurately, how are you going to move the ball, when everybody's, and that's what happened with the Minnesota game. They just stacked the box. And frankly, Rutgers is a little bit more physical and better in most areas than I would say Minnesota is. Granted, they went to Madison and lost, but, the common element in all 3 of their losses is huge bad plays on offense. I mean, like pick sixes.
Yep.
Wisconsin towards the end of the half. I mean, Ohio State, Michigan, they all 3 had these big swing plays offensively. So if they don't make a mistake, they're really a tough team to beat, even without in any kind of a passing game. So I don't know, that begs me to wonder, Cooper DeJean on offense. He had 2 plays the other day. They were a glorious 2 plays, and they need to be more. Having him out on an island defensively, is that the best use of his talent, on Saturday, or is it having him behind center, faking the handoff and or running? That to me might be a little bit more important. And then maybe going with a 4-3, maybe even having Xavier Wampa playing corner, something like that. But that's not anything that Iowa does.
Yeah, I get no sense at all that Kirk's even considering that or anything like that. I think if we get him on offense, it's not going to be a ton, but we have to revel and frolic in the times we do see him out there like we did on Saturday for those 2 plays. Hopefully they have a pass play involved. I think I know teams, it was funny because if you remember back several weeks ago, PJ Fleck in his press conference leading up to the Iowa game talked about the possibility of DeJean playing offense. So other coaches know that possibility is there, and now they saw it. So now they have to prepare for it. And that's good for Iowa, putting him in there, however you decide to use him, as long as you utilize him the right way, whether it's decoy or call a play. Scott, you talked about Rutgers' rushing offense. The quarterback's a runner. They've got a good running back. They ran for, 232, 5.4 yards per carry against Ohio State. That's got to have Iowa's attention.
No question. I mean, they are a really good team. I mean, and they have the leading rusher in the Big Ten, and Kyle Monangai. I have a hard time pronouncing
I purposely did not say his name so you would handle that.
Yeah. Kind of a stocky, smallish guy that looks to me like he's going to be an NFL player. I mean, and if they have Isaiah Pacheco, who is a nothing draft pick that's turned out to be a really good running back. So I think he's in that same ballpark. And then, you look at Gavin Winsett. He's not the best. Obviously, he's not a very good passer, but he's a good runner. And so, they're going to zone read, and then he's going to take off. And Iowa's going to have to be very careful about this. And they are kind of physical up front. So this is going to be a serious situation. This is why Noah Shannon would have been really helpful, just from a rotational point of view, even if he only has 25 snaps or so, just to be out there, because everybody's getting a little bit banged up. But anyway, it's going to be a lot like Northwestern, but they're better. And Northwestern's better than what they were when they played Rutgers. But you just got to, I see Iowa running a lot of 4-3, and that they probably should. Heck, I'd run 5-2 if I, go really old school here. But then
run that goal line defense that they used at Northwestern. Bring Jaden Harrell in.
Yeah, a 6-4-1. That's what it was. It was 6 linemen, 4 linebackers, and Sebastian Castro, who might as well be a linebacker.
Jay Higgins is a friggin' gift that keeps giving, talking about that goal line stand. He's like, yeah, we got the defensive backs off the field. It was great.
Yeah, I know. He's awesome. I love Jay Higgins. Yeah.
But I was considering this, and I think you would agree with me. Wouldn't this be the best win for either one of these teams, Rutgers and Iowa, this season?
Yeah, because what's Iowa's right now? Iowa State
or Wisconsin?
Yeah,
they're Wisconsin lost at Indiana.
Yeah, Iowa State's 5-4. They lost to Ohio. So I mean, and Rutgers, I don't think has beaten anybody.
Rutgers, I had this. Like I said, I was working on my advance. Rutgers. Their conference wins have come against Northwestern, Indiana, and Michigan State, who are combined 4-14 in league play. It lost to the Buckeyes, Michigan, and Wisconsin, who are combined 15-3. Obviously, Wisconsin is the owner of those 3 losses, but I think it's a prove-it game for both of these teams.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Iowa is ranked by the College Football Playoff Committee, and that's an important distinction here. And Rutgers kind of needs a signature win to validate that step up. And Iowa provides it, because if Iowa could win the West, and hey, we beat the best team in the West. And plus Iowa has been it is a solid program. And it shows that, hey, we're on the right trajectory. We went to Iowa City, a tough environment against a physical team that does it exactly like we do. And we won that game. That's what Greg Schiano was thinking, because, beating Ohio State or Michigan, that's, either they've got to be really down or you've got to be at your absolute peak level. And they're not there yet. And neither is Michigan or Ohio State, but in Iowa is. And, they already went to Wisconsin and they hung. Other than that pick 6, they were right there. And so that's what they're thinking, that, all right, it's just going to be about toughest team's going to survive this. And when you look at them and you look statistically, and they've played comparable competition, other than, they played Wagner, and that's not that's not good. But other than that, I mean, they're right there. And one of the things that they do really well is they're number 1 in the country in kickoff returns. So you've got to.
I saw that. I didn't realize that till I started going through the notes.
Yeah. So you have that, and if you're telling Drew Stevens, kick it out of the end zone. Don't even.
He can do that.
Yeah, and he should do that, unless they kick it in the wind or something.
Yes. 2:30 Saturday, Kinnick Stadium, Rutgers visiting Iowa. And just to close on that, Scott, I think you make a great point. There are a lot of teams that get to, and we've seen this because Kirk's been around so long, teams that come into the Big Ten, or new coaches in the Big Ten that are looking to model their program. They to look to Iowa a ton. Because if you're Rutgers, you can't model yourself after Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State. You got to look at Wisconsin and Iowa, and schools like that. Michigan State, when it has it going. Illinois last year, if Brett Bielema can get those, you're trying to have the success. You're trying to be the top of that tier. And now next year, when it expands, all that shit goes out the window, and then you've got to figure out which tier you're in again. Yeah. But at least right now, Iowa is a model program for schools like Rutgers.
Yeah, absolutely. And Northwestern did it way back when Gary Barnett was there. Wisconsin did it. When Barry Alvarez went there, looking at Hayden Fry, and you see, Bielema, of course, is going to do it, because he was here, and he's also, so it's not hard. Okay, that's they what they do is something we can do. They develop their guys. They bring them in, they coach them up, and then they bring them along. That makes sense. You can't go to Ohio. You can't say, well, we're going to sign 10 5-stars, or whatever, 5 or whatever they do at Ohio State or Michigan or Penn State and recruit at that level and have a 100,000 seat stadium. And that's unrealistic. But what is realistic is looking over at Iowa and saying, okay, in year 3 and 4 and 5, that's when their linemen really take over. And that's when their players become good. And so, and again, this would be a signature win for Rutgers. And so I'm sure he's thinking about that, because now this is the trap game for them to some extent. If you think about it, they play Ohio State last week, then they go to Penn State next week, and then they're the greatest rivalry ever. Then they finish with Maryland.
Throw the Rutgers out the window.
Yeah, right.
Those two get together.
Yeah, hopefully you don't throw the people out the window. But this is a winnable game for them that they believe, and they are right. It's just the one thing Iowa has done in the past and needs to do again, just like it did last year against Rutgers, is score on defense. They had a pick six. Yeah, they had a pick six, and they had Castro had just a thunderous hit that Kayvon Merriweather returned for a touchdown. So otherwise it was an even game. That's what Iowa needs to do, and of course that's what Iowa needs to stay away from on offense.
Yep. Create your identity, know who you are, and lean into it. That's what Iowa does. That's what Rutgers is trying to do. So definitely a statement game for both of these teams on Saturday. I think it helps Iowa and its legitimacy as being a top 25 team if it can beat one of the other teams in its tier in the Big Ten right now. So we'll see what happens on Saturday. Quickly do a little basketball here, Scott. Again, folks, we're not going to spend a lot of time on basketball this time of year. We're going to have all winter to talk about it, and we wanted to dedicate a lot. We had the Noah Shannon and the gambling thing today too, which will take away from basketball a little bit. But start with the women, Scott. They play Virginia Tech tonight. Big Virginia Tech's ranked 8th. I think what's Iowa, 3rd?
Yeah, 3rd.
Correct. So 3 versus 8. That's 7:00 tonight. Is it ESPN?
ESPN or ESPN2? I can't remember which one. I think it's ESPN2. But
okay, check your local listings. Iowa, a 102-46 winner over Fairleigh Dickinson. Fairly ridiculous on Monday. 102-46 that was in the season opener. I guess one of the more interesting parts of this game, Scott, when they were going to win that game no matter what, was Sharon Goodman starting over Addison O'Grady. A little bit of a change. I looked this up again. Pre-show preparation. Sharon Goodman played 16 minutes. She was 7 of 8 from the floor, 19 points and 4 rebounds. Addison O'Grady played 20 minutes, so 4 more minutes. Again, the game was out of hand. She was 4 for 9 with 4 rebounds and 3 assists to finish with 9 points. If you combine those two, 28 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists in 37 minutes. It's Monica Sinano.
Yeah, and it's by committee. And that's probably the way they're going to have to do it, because you've got, does either one have Monica Sinano's skills? Maybe, but not yet. And I was a little bit surprised too when I saw Sharon Goodman get the start, because I thought Addison O'Grady was kind of in there. But that's what a month's worth of practice does. That they decide, okay, who's the person. But when you're going to split reps like that, and who knows, maybe it'll just rotate. And tonight they've got one hell of a task ahead of them. Both of them do. So
maybe that was part of it, getting both of them ready for this.
Yeah, I mean, Elizabeth Kitley is
legit.
Yes, the ACC Player of the Year. She's really, really good. I mean, you're just gonna have to hope to contain her. I would say in that Mackenzie Holmes range. She's a little bit more athletic, but she's a player that they're going to have some issues with, no question. And it's ESPN2, by the way. And Beth Bowens will be on the call. So
I don't mind Beth. That's not my commentary for me. She doesn't bother me at all, but I know she gets under the skin of some of the Hawkeye fans. So.
Yeah. So you can always watch the Bears on Amazon Prime, but
don't make it personal, people.
Yeah. So, but this is a huge test for them. And you look at their early schedule, Rob. I mean, it's full of tests. I mean, going to UNI won't be all that easy. I mean, Kansas State beat them last year, and they come here next week. They go to, they have Drake, and Drake took them to overtime last year. So, and eventually then they start playing Iowa State and stuff. So they're getting tested, and it's good for them because this is a great team and they need these opportunities. And whatever happens tonight, it will be important for them to learn from, win or lose. But obviously they're going there to win.
And I think a win puts them number one next week.
After LSU's debacle. Yeah, they didn't. It was more like this.
Colorado was a good team. It wasn't as big of an upset as some people make it out to be, but it was an upset, and maybe foreshadows a crazy season in women's college basketball, because I think there are a lot of good teams that could compete for this thing, Scott.
They didn't see it coming, Rob. That was the whole thing there. I know there were a lot of bummers from Iowa fans seeing that, because Iowa beat Colorado, was Sweet 16, right?
Yes.
And last year, and they were a pretty good team. I thought they played hard, and Iowa had a phenomenal game, of course. But that's it does foreshadow. I mean, whether it's UConn or Iowa, moving up, it's going to be a really entertaining year, and tonight is just another example of that.
Yes, no doubt. And as Scott said, ESPN2 at 7:00. Check that out. Before we get to our picks, we'll hit on men's basketball a little bit. Tuesday night, I was at Carver. Hawkeyes opened the season with a 110-68 victory over North Dakota. And pretty good balance, Scott, really balanced scoring, which was nice to see. Owen Freeman, just tremendous off the bench, the freshman from Moline, 15 minutes. He scored 14 points. That's productive. And then everybody else kind of chipped in. And I think that's kind of what we're going to need to see from this team this year. Obviously, they're going to face better competition than North Dakota starting next week at Creighton. Will be number 8 Creighton will be the first big test. But this is a team, Scott, I think if it makes it back to the tournament, is going to be a team who is going to need that. It's going to need contributions from 7, 8, 9 guys every night. And they're going to be nights where, Peyton Sanfort's the guy, or maybe Tony Perkins or Patrick end up being the leading scorer. It's just not a team built like it's been recently, where you have, one of the Murrays or Luka Garza. This is a team that I think has to be, the sum is greater than the parts, or whatever that stupid saying is. That's kind of what this team is.
Yeah, for sure. Because there's a lot of question marks here, Rob. And I think they have some talent. And I like some of their younger players. I think they're going to be good contributors. But for the most part, all of these guys that have been here have been contributors, not necessarily stars. I mean, Patrick McCaffrey may be at the top of the list, and Tony Perkins, but they've been kind of pieces. They've been inconsistent at times. DeSante Bowen, finally, last year, where was he? Everybody kind of had him written off by midseason. Then he kind of played a little bit late. And Ben Krikke it was really good, but that was in the Valley, and he's going to be good in these games. But, what's he going to be like when he's going against Big Ten operations? And, Peyton Sanfort has had a lot of really big shots already in his young career, but, and I expect that to continue. But then you start to look at the freshmen, Owen Freeman and Brock Harding. Do they make pushes to get really meaningful minutes? Dembele, is that how you spell it? Dembele. Dembele, I think it is. He's got a really big physique, and I think he's going to be really impactful. And Josh Dix, as he continues to, I think now the broken leg is kind of in the rearview mirror, but he's still also coming on. So, and of course, Price Sanford, as well. So there's a lot of pieces here. They're going to have to play this way until they kind of organically figure out who's kind of the main scorer, who's going to be kind of the main reserves. You can't really force it. You got to let it kind of settle before you really let it, before it gets forward. And it was a good first game for Iowa. They needed that. Tomorrow night, they're going to get another one that's going to be in the same ballpark, if not even more or less competitive against Alabama State. But, as you said, getting it right for Creighton is going to be that's going to be a telling game, kind of like Virginia Tech for Iowa women, more so here with Creighton because, nobody's predicting a win with that. You're just going to have to hope that they can, compete, have players step up, and figure out, okay, is Desante Bowen really going to be your guy, or are you going to have to start really looking at, maybe Harding has got to figure it out. We saw that before, like with when it was Christian Williams and Jordan Bohannon, that, it took them time, took them a month. And that's why you have these games early, and then you start to figure out, okay, what's next.
I liked what I saw from Bowen the other night. Again, you have to put it in context of the competition, but he looked much more under control, much more involved in running offense instead of freelancing sometimes, but knew when to freelance. They played 4 guys at the point the other day. Yeah. Bowen started. Josh Dix played some point. Tony Perkins played some point, and then as Scott mentioned, Brock Harding. So they're still figuring that position out, and we'll see what happens as we go down the road here. Yeah, Alabama State tomorrow night, 7:00 at Carver. Also, I wanted to mention this before we get to our picks. Women's soccer, Big Ten tournament champions, will host an NCAA tournament game tomorrow night, 6:00 over at the Iowa Soccer Complex. If you're unfamiliar, it's over by the Hall of Fame there. 6:00 against Bucknell. So if you're in town for football, check out men's basketball, check out the soccer, whatever. There's stuff going on tomorrow night. So if you're in town and don't get a chance to see some other Iowa sports sometimes other than football, check it out. Let's get to the picks, Scott. As much as I hate to hear, well, you already told me before we started recording, I sucked last week. So let the audience know how bad I sucked.
All right. Well, you were 2-5. I was 3-4. It wasn't a banner week for either one of us. That's for sure.
We're supposed to get better as the season goes on, not worse.
Yeah. Well, we're picking up all these little dings and injuries and stuff. We both were right on Ohio State and Penn State's wins. We both lost like Minnesota. Ouch. -3. We both picked the Mighty Gophers. We both picked Iowa -5.5, and we both picked Michigan, and that was kind of a lackluster game. But -31.5 is tough in the Big Ten sometimes teams. And then we both also picked Nebraska, foolishly, as I always say to myself. And then finally we split on, and I had Indiana, you had Wisconsin, and
thanks to Wisconsin and Nebraska for being the first teams to lose to Michigan State and Indiana in the Big Ten this season. They both lost to winless teams.
Yes. It doesn't any kind of argument or something I want to make about the Big Ten West goes out the window when these games happen. You just can't even you can't even say, well, yeah, but other than the other 3, it's no, you can't even do that because these teams are garbage. And last week we walked in here, Rob, and it was and we had a 4-way tie atop the top of the West, and now it's a 1 team top of the West, but that can change this weekend.
Yep.
So first things up, we've got the Battle of the Eyes here. Indiana at Illinois. Illinois is a 6.5-point favorite. The over/under is 43.5. I'm going to go with Indiana. I think Illinois might win, but I'm going to pick Indiana to at least cover on this.
Is that in Champaign?
Yeah, it's in Champaign.
5.5, you say?
6.5.
6.5. I can't give that many points with Illinois' offense.
Yeah.
I'll go Indiana.
Yeah, they're probably the most dangerous of the offenses left for Iowa, which speaks to the teams that win.
That is not a very strong endorsement, Scott.
Yeah, I know, but they have an old friend, and we'll talk about him next week. Caden Fagan, and that they try to recruit pretty hard, and then
they're going to see a couple good running backs the next 2 weeks, no doubt about that.
Yeah, and then they also play Isaiah Williams for Illinois is probably the best receiver that they've got, at least until they play Marvin Harrison or Roman Wilson in the Big Ten championship game, if they do make it there. Here's the one where you just throw up your hands and go, why, God, why? Maryland at Nebraska. Maryland is a 2.5-point favorite at Nebraska, which who would have ever dreamed that than the case when they both were admitted to the Big Ten. 45 I'm sorry, is the over under here. I can see this so many different ways. I'm going to go with Maryland. I don't know. Quarterback. They got a quarterback. They've got a passing game. They have stumbled all over themselves. So I'm not really happy to pick them, but I would have gladly taken Nebraska, but they did the same thing last week. So I'm going to take Maryland and say, stay away from this. Do not go to the casino or you're apt to bet on it.
Yeah, this is goofy. That line's goofy. This game is goofy. Doesn't even seem like a Big Ten game. I'm going to take the home team here, just throwing a dart. One team's traveling halfway across the country. I think Nebraska, its defense can at least slow Maryland a bit. So that's my reasoning for this. But really, I'm just throwing a dart.
It's so weird because, yes, I could see Nebraska finally sacking up and all of a sudden, all right, they win 31-17 and look good doing it. And all right, they're back. Black shirts are back.
They'll lose next week.
Yeah, and then they'll lose to Wisconsin. I mean, they do it every other game here. But anyway, that's just Minnesota at Purdue, -1.5 for the Boilers at home. 46.5 as the over-under. I'm going to take the home team. And this goes contrary to what I really think. Desmond King is going to be the honorary captain, by the way, on Saturday.
Nice.
Yeah, just got released. But I'm going to take Purdue at home against Minnesota. It makes no sense, but neither does the Big Ten as a whole. So I'm going to take the Boilers.
I'm going to go with Minnesota.
Okay.
I really don't have a reason why, just a feel.
Yeah. I mean, Minnesota should have won last week and blew it.
Yeah, I can't figure out the teams in the Big Ten West.
Yeah. I mean, they're up by 5 with like a minute and a half left, and Illinois had to go the length of the field, and they did it with a backup quarterback.
Yep.
And out of like a 50-yard touchdown pass. So just insanity, wrapped in insanity. Next one, Northwestern at Wisconsin. Wisconsin -10.5, and the over/under is 42.5. Rob, I don't know. I'm going to take Northwestern to cover. I think Wisconsin wins, but I think Northwestern might make it a close game.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'll take the 10.5. I ain't throwing 10.5 with any team in the Big Ten West, man. None of the offenses are good enough to throw 10.5 points.
Exactly. It's I don't know. Wisconsin, if Braylon Allen is healthy and maybe if Tanner Mordecai was there and they were throwing the ball better than they should, then you'd think, they got a shot. No, I don't know. After losing to Indiana, I'm not going to give them the benefit of the doubt anymore. Michigan State at Ohio State is the primetime game on NBC. Ohio State -31.5 at home against the Sparties. And I'm going to throw the points. I mean, I know the Sparties came up and had a big, nice win against mighty Nebraska last week, but I think in Ohio State, of course, had a struggle there with Rutgers, but I think this one could be one of those 48-0 at halftime type of deals.
I feel like this is deja vu of the Michigan game last week because that point spread was 31.5.
Yeah,
in that game, and they didn't cover. But I'm going to go back to the well and throw the 31.5 with the superior team here, but would not be surprised at all if Michigan State gets like a backdoor, keeps it within 30.
Yeah. It's 38-0, and then they score with a minute to go to make it 38-7, and then they cover, something stupid like that. But, here's what's really interesting is it opened at 68 and at least it was yesterday, 47.5. I mean, the drop on the over-under is.
It dropped 20 points?
20 and a half. Yeah.
That is rare.
Yeah. I never seen anything like that before. So, Here's the game of the day and maybe game of the season part 2 out of 3. Michigan at Penn State. Michigan is a 5.5 point favorite, and the over-under is 45.5. You know what? I'm going to take the upset. Give me the 5.5, and I'm going to take Penn State Nittany Lions to cover here and possibly win outright.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't know if they pull off the upset and throw things in disarray in the East. But I think they cover that 5.5.
Yeah. So they play much better at home than they do on the road. I was looking at Drew Aller's stats. He completes 71% at home and like 54% on the road.
Wow.
And Michigan's, if they were playing in Ann Arbor, I'd probably be like,
yeah, that number would be a lot higher.
Yeah, it'd probably be 10 or so, or 9.5 or something like that. And then the game we're covering, Rob, the over under is 4. No, it's 28 and a half.
First 1 to 3.
Yeah, first points wins. It's sudden death, and we'll all be here for 5 quarters. But 28 and a half. Iowa, they have here is last I saw 1.5.
That's what I saw too.
Okay, it was 5.5. I think it opened, and then it went down to 1.5. This is a really dangerous game here. Everything is telling me pick Rutgers. But then you start to go, yeah, but Iowa's got something too. Iowa's not just some team that rolls over. They've won 12 out of the last 15, and they're playing at home. And so I'm going to take Iowa, but not feel great about it.
I will reluctantly join you in that selection. But I think it's going to be this way the rest of the season with these Iowa games. They're going to be tight point spreads and toss-up games that can go either way. I don't think you're going to be retiring betting on these games, because now the odds makers have pushed the over-under totals to the ridiculously historically low levels that it's going to be hard to even play that moving forward.
Yeah, right. I know. I mean, it was kind of funny, throughout the whole season, it's been this, limbo game of woo, you're rolling under, everything. And so
let me throw you out some trends here, Scott, like I do like to do each week. For this game, for the Iowa game, Rutgers is 6-1-2 against the spread in its last 9 games. The total has gone over in 4 of Rutgers' last 5 games. The total has gone under in 5 of Iowa's last 6 games. And this one's really good. The Hawkeyes are 15-1 straight up in their last 16 games played in November.
Yeah. And the only loss was Nebraska last year when everybody was hurt. So anyway, this is going to be fascinating. But grab your asses, everybody, because it's going to be another edge of your seater, I think, on Saturday, coming down to the end of the game, and be loud. Yeah, give Iowa the home field advantage, because that could be a big part of Saturday, no doubt about it. Pre-snap penalties on Rutgers, things like that. You can affect this game, Hawkeye fans. Yeah, that is for sure. Absolutely. I mean, if Torrey Taylor dumps one at the 3-yard line and they can't hear the snap count in the north end zone, and it's offsides, or somebody doesn't get doesn't hear the snap, and then somebody goes around the edge, that could be a safety. And that could be the difference. 1.5 points. It could be 12-10 that way.
Yeah. 4-3.
Yeah.
4-3. Something like that.
Oh, if only.
All right, folks. Well, we appreciate you listening to this. Got to get Scott out of here so he can do his next podcast here in 20 minutes when Chad likes to go. Say hi to Chad for me. Hopefully he's
I will.
Week. Haven't seen him in a couple days. But thank you, everybody, for listening to the podcast. We appreciate our sponsors more than they know, so we appreciate them supporting this podcast on the Hawk Fanatic feed. And Scott and I will be back to talk to you next week. Until then, say goodbye, Scott.
Goodbye, Scott.